A woman from Australia voted in 2 American elections. She's not a citizen of this country, and she cast a ballot in 2022 and again in 2024. The only reason we know her name is that she finally got caught. And the one bill that would actually stop this from happening, the bill that 50 senators say they support, the Save America Act, the United States Senate just went home and let it die. So today, we're asking the simplest question in America. If only citizens are supposed to vote, why is it so hard to make sure they do? Welcome to the Jenny Beth Show. I'm Jenny Beth Martin.
Welcome to the Jenny Beth Show.
Can Americans still trust our elections, and will only American citizens decide them? Almost everything on the board today runs back to these questions. And 3 of the sharpest minds in the country are on with us this hour to discuss it. Let me set the table. Start in the Senate because that's where the fight is. The Save America Act would require proof of citizenship to register to vote and voter ID to cast a ballot. The House has passed it. 50 senators are on the record for it. Senator Tom Tillis has called it dead, not defeated on the floor, not filibustered in the old sense, just left on the desk while senators drove to the airport. Tea Party Patriots Action has run a coalition and an 18-stop bus tour to win this issue. The goal is not in doubt. 50 senators agree on the goal. Quitting is a choice, and leadership can still reverse it. Now, here's why that bill matters so much. The Department of Justice just warned all 50 states that election officials could face criminal prosecution if they are not enforcing the ban on non-citizen voting. And days before that letter went out, federal agents arrested an Australian green card holder accused of voting in 2 federal elections. There is already a law that says non-citizens cannot vote. What there is not is a way to enforce that law. That gap is where the whole argument is. That gap is exactly why we need the Save America Act, and it's exactly the gap the Save America Act closes. While we're fighting to protect your vote, watch how the other side treats his own. In Maine, Democrats just forced out their own Senate nominee, Graham Platner, after his latest sexual assault allegation, which he denies. Sexual allegations were reported before the Democrats nominated him. The party that told you to believe all women stood behind him until it got inconvenient, and then they've pushed him out so they can handpick their replacement. Remember that the next time they lecture you about democracy. And the citizenship question is not settled just because the Supreme Court has ruled on it. In Trump versus Barber, the court upheld birthright citizenship 5-4, with Justice Thomas needing 91 pages to explain why the majority is wrong. The president now says he will ask the court to rehear the case, and in Congress, Senator Marsha Blackburn and Congressman Keith Self are writing legislation to address it. And then there is news that the Memorandum of Understanding and the ceasefire in Iran will not stand. Overnight, United States forces struck more than 80 targets in Iran. The White House says Iran broke the ceasefire by striking commercial ships in the Strait of Hormuz. The president has made his own position plain. The ceasefire is over. The oil sanctions are back. So here is who is going to help me break down these crucial issues today. Janelle King from the Georgia State Election Board discusses a new transparency rule for how your vote is counted. Ned Jones, one of the country's leading experts on the vulnerability of voting by mail, will be here to discuss the Supreme Court decision related to mail-in voting and postmarks on ballots. And later, on a very different and much-needed high note, singer and songwriter Jon Kahn is going to discuss a project putting America back into song. It's a full show today. But before we get to our guest, let's hit our call to action. Only American citizens should decide American elections. It's not just a slogan, it's a whole idea. And for 250 years, the promise has been simple. The people who live under the laws in America are the people who choose the lawmakers. Right now, there is a law that says non-citizens cannot vote, but there is no real way to enforce it. The Save America Act would fix it. If we cannot guarantee that only citizens are voting, then we cannot guarantee that our vote means anything. We want to make it easy to vote and hard to cheat. There are two ways you can make your voices heard on this issue today. First, call both of your senators who are home this week. You can call the Capitol switchboard at 202-224-3121. Ask for each of your senators and tell them to finish the job and pass the Save America Act. For talking points and frequently asked questions and to email those senators directly, go to passthesaveamericaact.com. Also, the president has until tomorrow, Friday, July the 10th, to veto the housing bill. We've been urging him to veto it until and unless the Save America Act is added to it. So go to whitehouse.gov/contact and ask the president to veto the housing bill until the Save America Act is attached to it. There's one other major action item for the week. It's a quieter fight, but it matters just as much. The Office of Management and Budget has proposed a rule to end diversity, equity, and inclusion mandates in federal grants and to put merit back at the center. The public comment window is open. Go to tpp.me/OMB comment to add your name. Federal grants should be rewarded on merit, not ideology. My first guest lives this fight from the inside every day related to election integrity. Janelle King serves on the Georgia State Election Board, and she has become one of the clearest voices in the country for transparency and voter confidence. Janelle, welcome to the Jenny Beth Show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here.
So Georgia just approved a new vote tabulation transparency rule. For someone hearing this for the first time, what actually changed in Georgia and why does it matter?
Well, we all know that Georgia has been at the center of election integrity since 2020, and when people started questioning the outcome of the election. But what we started noticing is that there were certain nuances that was kind of driving people towards their discomfort around our elections. And one of those things was the fact that when our counties once you go in and you vote and our counties close the election precinct, and all that data that's on those memory cards is uploaded and is getting sent to the Secretary of State, which sits in a private location, which we've coined the bunker, but it's a reporting center that they sit in. They obtain all of that data. And here's the thing. There isn't much oversight there, if any. We don't have observers in there. And I believe that there's a break in the chain of custody when all the data is going to one centralized location before it is uploaded to the public. What happens in that room is they look at the numbers and they, I guess, critique it or review it against whatever enhanced voting the third party system has. And then that data, if it doesn't align, they will contact the counties and say, your numbers are not right. And then the counties then have to correct it. But all of this happens prior to the data being uploaded online, where we all can now see what these outcomes are. So we just wanted to provide an additional layer of transparency. We believe that there should be observers in that room to ensure that everything is happening above board.
Well, there really should be observers in the room. In Georgia, you're supposed to be able to observe the entire process anyway. In 2020, between the original general election and the runoff, there were rules and notices that went out to all of the local county boards of election, letting them know that observers could come in, not poll watchers, but really, I would say public observers, because there was no special training, nothing special needed. They could come in and watch all of the processing of ballots.
Yeah.
And that means that as ballots were coming in, the mail-in ballots that were coming in, they could just watch them, open the envelope, watch what was happening as they were still in the secret envelope and not removed from it, but people were able to observe and confirm that's exactly what was happening. And then once the processing and the removal of those ballots began, you're also allowed to watch that. So if you're allowed to watch all of that with a paper, you should be allowed to watch the exact same thing as they're counting what becomes the ballot, because even though you've got the receipt, the actual ballot in Georgia winds up becoming the computer code. So you should be able to watch it.
Yes, so technically, yes, right? So technically the tabulation process is watched because it's watched on the county level. However, when that data is presented to the state, that's where the chain of custody is then broken, because now we have to trust that whatever is being presented to us from the state is what they've gotten from our counties. Well, we have 159 counties. So let's just say Toombs County reports their numbers, and then the state says, oh, this doesn't match with what we have. And I'm questioning, where are you getting your data from? However, if they say that, or let's just say they say the poll pads or numbers off or something's just off, they then will communicate with the county and tell the county to address this. All of this is happening behind the backs of the voter. We don't get to see any of this. And so I couldn't tell you, even as sitting on the state election board, I couldn't tell you which counties in these most recent elections that may have had some discrepancies in their numbers and they had to rectify it or correct it over time. I couldn't tell you because I don't know. And that's where the problem lies. We asked the SOS if they can allow some of the board members, the Republican nominee and the Democrat nominee, to be observers during this process. They refused it. It went to court. We're now appealing it. The court said that we don't have to be in there, but we are appealing that. And we felt, as the state election board, we do have the authority to create rules that could provide more transparency around the election process. And that is what we decided to do.
Yeah, it should be. Are the Democrats on the board, do they think that you should be able to observe that as well? Is this really a nonpartisan issue, or is it stacking up to be partisan?
Well, I can't speak for my fellow board member, but I will say that she did not support the rules. So I'm assuming that she does not think it's necessary.
Okay, that's fine. And it's strange to me that they don't, but I understand right now, sometimes when it comes to election transparency issues, it winds up being partisan, but it shouldn't be. Like, if the roles were reversed and a Democrat were asking for it, I understand why they would be asking for it. Everyone should this is one way to eliminate concern that anything is happening that should not be behind closed doors.
Well, there are Democrat voters that absolutely agree with us and believe that this should be observed. However, the representative on the board, she feels differently. But there are I don't see this as a partisan issue. Matter of fact, elections should never be partisan. And what I always try to remind people is that right now I'm on the board. I won't be on the board for my entire life, and neither will these same board members. I've seen it change since I've been there. And what I believe is that we need to ensure that there are policies, rules, things in place, whether we're working with the legislature to make policy or creating rules as a state election board. They all need to align and create full transparency so that no matter who is on the board or who has majority, that our election process is not messed with.
So when what exactly triggered the board going, this is something we really need to address?
Well, we found out that one of our board members were able to go into the bunker, and he had sat in the bunker before. And we just said, well, if you've done it, why can't we? And that kind of what started the conversation. And we started getting pushback. And I just didn't understand why we were getting such pushback from doing something that should be something that the public approves and is excited about. And so from there, the more they pushed back, the more we felt like we needed to be in there. And then we were told that there's no reason to have anyone in there because nothing happens. But in the same breath, they explained the process of communicating with the counties and getting them to adjust or fix their numbers if they are not the way, they are not approved or whatnot. So when we heard that, we said, well, no, that's a major step in our election process. So there isn't nothing to see here. And if you're correct and there is absolutely nothing to see, then why not show us what's in there? I mean, if you're just sitting in there and collecting data and everything's smooth and going great, then you shouldn't push back on having observation.
And do you know what the arguments are from the Secretary of State's office? Why are they so opposed to this?
I couldn't tell you. I mean, the biggest argument I guess we've heard is that we just don't have the authority to demand to be in the room. But we asked. So I have no idea what the real pushback is, other than them continuing to tell us that nothing happens, so there's no reason to have observation, but then telling us something happens. So I couldn't tell you.
I find it one of the most bizarre pushbacks from the Secretary of State. And I have been to the local election board in Georgia. Mm-hmm. And I have sat there, and pretty much the ones that when I have gone in, they've just said, well, you can see anything that we're doing, because if you request it through a Freedom of Information Act, the equivalent of that in Georgia, mm-hmm. then we'd have to show you anyway. So you can see so the local boards are allowing full transparency. It boggles the mind when the Secretary of State just won't extend that.
Absolutely. I keep telling people that, the election process is a public process. The only aspect of it that is private is how or who you vote for. It's who you vote for. But the way you vote, the process of tabulating the votes, everything else has to be transparent. That's the way our system is designed. That's the way our forefathers designed it. And that way the Constitution protects it. Anything outside of that is a problem.
And why is it so important for it to be transparent, other than protecting the actual, I have the right to a secret ballot and no one should be able to interfere with that. And for the audience, I think that's very important, because if I don't have that, I could be coerced or bribed into voting, not my conscience, but the way some outside influence on me either forces me to vote or bribes me to vote. But why is transparency so important?
You know what? I have a different take on it, other than some, because some may say it's just important because we need to know, right? I think it's important because I can't do my duty as a voter. I can't question, I can't scrutinize if I don't know the process. And I have spoken with too many people who could not tell me what happens the moment their vote is cast. They walk out of the precinct and they have no idea what happens on the back end. It is our duty as Americans to understand our election process, to know how it works, to scrutinize it, to question it, to ensure that we are getting the representation that we are asking for and that we have chosen, and not who the powers that be are choosing for us. So it's extremely important. Every decision that happens politically, every policy that is made through a handful of people that we have decided to represent us. And if we don't know that our vote is being cast appropriately, and if we don't understand the process, then how do we know that the person representing us is exactly who the majority of us, because while this is a representative republic, we all know that it still has a democracy aspect to it when it comes to voting. So how do I know that who we all want is who is being selected if I can't follow the process?
That makes, it's a very good argument that you're making there, and a good reason why it should be transparent. And then you just spoke of the citizens' duty to understand and be able to make sure they're protecting their own vote. What are other things you think it's important for citizens to do when it comes to election integrity?
I think we need to start by placing a more of a priority on primaries than we do. I think a lot of times we get a little lazy around primaries and then we all get excited in the general. The primary is where you put your best work in. As a voter, I think we need to make sure we are vetting every single candidate. Do not take the word for it when it comes to these messages that go out. My husband recently ran, and the state SOS sent out text messages and left his name off of the list of Secretary of State candidates. So you can't trust these text messages that go out. What you have to do is, and excuse me, it was actually a nonprofit that was associated with members of the Secretary of State that sent that out. However, when I see things like that, it tells me that we are no longer in a position where we can just read articles here and there. We need to go and look for ourselves, figure out how to find out everyone, do our own vetting. But most importantly, we need to do as much work as possible in that primary. Demand that everyone debate. Demand that they present themselves before you and that you can ask them questions, and don't cower to the position. Instead, ask the tough and hard questions during that primary. I think we need to put more of an emphasis on the primary.
I think that is great, and that means it's in. So we need the emphasis on the primary, and people need to remember that we vote more than just one time every 4 years.
Right.
And the general election absolutely is important, and the primary election and being engaged and actually casting ballots in that election is equally important.
Exactly. Very much so. I totally agree.
Janelle, I want to ask you one last question. It's a little bit off of this topic, but it shouldn't be very difficult. We just celebrated America's 250th anniversary. What makes you proud to be an American? And you have this amazing job where you get to protect our elections. How does the anniversary, the 250th anniversary, tied to your position? What does it mean to you?
Yeah, I am extremely patriotic. And a lot of it has to do with the fact that I just know that we live in the greatest country on earth. I know that there were so many moments in time. If you go back and study the American Revolution and everything that took place, there were so many moments where we saw the hand of God on this country. I believe that God wanted this country to be formed. I believe that he wanted to be formed the way that it was. There was so much great energy and thought that was put into our system. And I feel like there's no other way to have this country if you don't maintain it. And it's up to us to maintain it. So I am just grateful that I get a chance to serve the state of Georgia and do my little part in protecting this country. But this country has been so good to me. It's been good to my family. It is the only country that can move you outside of poverty the faster than any other country. And I just love it. So I wish more people were as patriotic and took advantage, but maybe they need to travel more and see how great we really are.
I love that. Thank you so much. And I am going to be praying for you as you go into this election season and for the entire state election board, because you have a very important job. We have to be able to trust the outcome of our elections. And when it comes to trusting the outcome, it doesn't matter who wins or loses. It's making sure that we all can trust that outcome so that once the people decide, we can at least respect the decision.
Absolutely. 100%. And thank you so much for spreading the word.
Thanks for joining me today, Janelle.
Absolutely. Anytime.
Okay, stay with us. We'll be right back after this quick break. And when we come back, we're going to have one of the country's leading experts on the real vulnerabilities of voting by mail. You are the grassroots of America. You love this country. When you love something, really love it, the news doesn't just inform you, it fires you up. And you find yourself asking, how can I make a difference? That is exactly what this show is built to answer. Never, ever, ever, ever give up. We owe it to every American who has ever voted to make America great again. We owe it to our future selves. We owe it to this republic to stand tall, to stay active, and to be smart about how we spend our energy so that we can win. Here on the Jenny Beth Show, we're going to help you do exactly that. Every show, we will break down the news, connect it to first principles, and give you specific, effective ways to take action. Not just outrage, action. and I am so glad you're here on this journey with us to do it. So let's get to it.
Welcome to the Jenny Beth Show.
Welcome back to the Jenny Beth Show. The next question is not just who votes, it is how we vote. Ned Jones studies the vulnerabilities of voting by mail for the Election Integrity Network. Ned, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Jenny Beth.
So, Ned, let's start with the basics. People use universal vote by mail and no excuse absentee ballot and think of it oftentimes as if they mean the exact same thing. What is the difference and why does that difference matter?
Well, it's very important. Universal vote by mail means everybody on the voter rolls gets a ballot, whether they're dead or alive, whether they've moved, whether they've gotten married, but everyone on those rolls at the time of the mailing gets a ballot. No excuse vote by mail is where anyone can request a ballot to vote by mail without an excuse. You know, back in the day, we used to have an excuse to vote by mail because we weren't going to be able to be in the precinct on election day. But this new trend is universal vote by mail and also this no excuse vote by mail.
So, what are the vulnerabilities in universal vote by mail that concern you the most? And are there also similar vulnerabilities when it comes to no excuse absentee voting?
Yeah, the vulnerabilities are really vote by mail. Starting in 2000, Oregon started universal vote by mail where every voter would get a ballot in the mail. Several states have joined them, mostly in the West. And then in 2020, the COVID election, vote by mail became very, very popular. And this was when we really started the no excuse vote by mail. So millions of voters now feel very comfortable with vote by mail. They feel like it's the same process as showing up on election day and voting in the precinct, except the difference here is you just hand your ballot to the USPS. And nothing could be further from the truth. The vulnerabilities in voting by mail are enormous, and voters just don't understand that.
Okay, so most Americans trust their mail carrier to deliver the mail to them. What are the vulnerabilities inside the Postal Service itself when millions of ballots are moving through it?
Well, you know, it starts with the number of people that have to handle that vote by mail ballot. If you vote in the precinct, it might be handled by one or two people as you walk through the line. But think about it, in the mail system, it's probably handled by 10 or a dozen people as it goes from the election office to the voter and then back to the election office for processing. There's absolutely no chain of custody in the USPS election mail system. Ballots are delivered to them to be taken to the voter in trays. There's no confirmation that those ballots are delivered, and there's no reconciliation of ballots received, ballots delivered, and ballots not delivered. There's no confirmation of the disposition of undeliverable ballots. In other words, if the voter's not at the address, there's no clear disposition about what happens to those undeliverable ballots. One of the things that's a misconception is that ballots can be tracked through the mail. And they can to a degree if the election official has paid for the correct, as we call it, intelligent mail barcode. But there's no scan at the point of delivery. So when the letter carrier shows up at the mailbox with a ballot, they don't scan it that it's been delivered. That scan, the last scan, happens in the building when they get a tray of ballots. And the same thing going back to the election office. When the election office says they received your ballot, all they're saying is they checked you off in the poll book. They're not actually confirming receipt. And so there's really no way to know that your ballot was processed, even though it may say that in the vote history.
Okay, explain that one more time. How is it that they can say they received the ballot, but they can't? It doesn't mean they've actually processed. I guess what you're saying is it doesn't mean they've processed the ballot.
Correct. In other words, the vote record is at the poll book. The next step is to run it through the equipment and process it. And there's absolutely no way to know if that happened. Now, we assume it happens, but there's no way to know that for sure. The only way you know that your ballot was processed is to show up in person and watch it go through the equipment.
And then, as we heard from our last guest, Janelle King, we still need people watching to make sure that even that is processed all the way through to the very end. But I'm just tying that back to the last guest. Okay, this is, I think, something that's very important that you're saying, and I want to just drive the point home that you're making. The ballot can move through the mail. Once it gets to the election office, they have it, and then it's got to be scanned and counted. And you still aren't positive that it's moving through the scanner and being counted. It's easier to be sure of that when you're at your local precinct or the early voting location and you see it going through the scanner.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We recommend that that's how people vote.
Ned, the Postal Service recently changed how it defines a postmark, didn't it?
Mm-hmm.
And okay,
Yes.
what changed? Why is that important? And remind people. I know that this is so obvious, but remind people exactly again what the postmark means.
Okay, what happens in 18 states, if a ballot is postmarked by election day, it can be received just any number of days after the election. And all of us, I think, thought that the postmark meant the day the Postal Service received a piece of mail. However, that's not exactly the case. Um, some years ago, they stopped putting a postmark, the receipt date, on envelopes at the local post office. They started doing it in processing centers. And then in 2021, they put in a brand new program called Delivering for America, where all mail is processed through, I believe it's 50 or 60 regional centers. And that's where a machine puts a postmark on an envelope. So if you mail your ballot locally, it's taken to a regional center for the postmark, and it is no longer, as defined by the Postal Service, the day they receive mail. It's a day that they possess mail, because that postmark may be applied as many as 2, 3, or 4 days from the day that a voter puts that ballot in the mail. And this is a significant change. In 18 states, if the ballot is postmarked by election day and received in a specific time period after, those ballots are counted. But the postmark no longer has the same meaning that it had when those statutes were established.
So, if I put it in the mailbox on election day, I may be thinking, well, I put it in by the deadline because I put it in on election day, but it may not even have the date on it for another couple of days, or it may not even have the date, maybe just one day until the very next day. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct, because what happens is it has to be taken to one of these regional processing centers, and in many cases, it's taken out of state. If you're near the border of your state, it may go to an adjoining state to be processed. The other part of Delivering for America was something they call local transportation optimization. They love initials, LTO. What that means is mail is held at the local post office for maybe a couple of days before it's actually taken to the processing center. They do this to build efficiency and supposedly to cut costs. It doesn't work, but what it does, it builds in additional delay in a system that already has significant delay in it. And so this is just another aspect of this Delivering for America, which really created the need for the clarification, as they call it, on the postmark, and there's additional delays. The closer you get to election day with that mail ballot, the more likely it may not be received and counted in time.
Okay. And then one more thing. When it comes to postmarks themselves, does every single piece of mail actually have a postmark and a date on it or not?
The answer is no. And the USPS they say they guarantee that every ballot envelope will have a postmark, but that's not really the case. Many ballots now are showing up without a postmark, or they may be delivered through a drop box. So election officials have resorted to other evidence of the date that a ballot was submitted. The classic case is California, where they are now going by the signature date on the ballot envelope if there's no postmark or other evidence. And in the recent election, ballots kept coming in for their 7-day receipt period after the actual election day. And it's very questionable as to when those ballots entered the mail flow.
So I think that that's something that's very important to realize, that every single piece of mail may not get a postmark. And I'm asking for all of these clarifications because it brings us to the Supreme Court decision, the RNC versus Secretary of State from Mississippi Watson case. For people who did not follow that, what happened in that decision, and how does it affect vote by mail?
Well, it was significant, and all of us were very hopeful that it would be decided differently. The case centered around the Mississippi statute that allows for ballots that are postmarked by Election Day and received within 5 days to be counted. And the lawsuit was filed to say that was unconstitutional, that Election Day is Election Day, and that all ballots should be received by Election Day. And so that's how it went to the court. And the court ruled last week in Watson, as we call it, that federal law stipulated that Election Day was Election Day, and that voters have to cast their ballot by Election Day. And they leaned on the postmark to determine that the voter had cast their ballot by Election Day if the ballot envelope was postmarked by Election Day, as in the Mississippi statute. However, they said it was up to the states to determine the receipt date. In other words, a state can determine how many days after Election Day a postmarked envelope can be received. Where they got it really wrong, we just discussed the change in the postmark. It no longer means mail date, so it no longer signifies voter cast date. And so I don't know what the recourse could be in a case like that, but they absolutely misunderstood what the postmark means in today's USPS system.
Well, Ned, I'm not an attorney. I'm absolutely not
Nor
an
I.
attorney. And I didn't even realize until yesterday that you could ask for the Supreme Court to rehear a case when I heard because I'm not an attorney, so there are things I don't know. So I'm completely fallible like everybody else, just so the audience knows. So I didn't know that until I saw that the president was going to ask the court to rehear this. I honestly think the RNC should do the exact same thing. And here's why. When I heard that, and I heard them talking about the postmark, and the reason I wanted you to come on is because you know way more about the postmark and the mail process than I do. I was just sitting there going, but wait, every piece of mail, not every ballot, but every piece of mail does not necessarily have a postmark on it. And then you've got the issues that you just mentioned where people think they're because we've been doing this for most of our life. So you think you're putting the mail into the slot and you put it in there by 5 o'clock when the mail is picked up, and the time on the mailbox says that's when the mail will be picked up. And you think that means your mail is going to have the date on it that it is of the day that you put it in there. It isn't doing that. So the state laws that were created for that purpose, thinking, okay, this is going to be done by Election Day. If we have it postmarked by Election Day, we're okay. Most people think that means that they put it in the box on Election Day and they're good to go. Well, you're clearly saying that's not the case because of the way the regional processing happens. Also, if the ballot itself is a metered mail ballot, if you don't have to put your own stamp on it and the election office has covered the postage for it, it may not get a cancellation, a postmark on it at all. That postmark cancels the stamp, so it can't be reused. And then when you go to the United States Postal Service's website for elections, they have a big thing on here. Let me just send my link over to my team so they can pop this on the screen. Postmarks. If you want to ensure that your mail receives a postmark on the date you mail it, ask a retail associate at the post office retail counter to hand cancel it. That means you've got to not just stick it in the box, but you've got to walk inside and wait in line and make sure they put a stamp on it. Most voters do not know this. And in states like California, can you imagine if every single person in California and Colorado and all of these places that have universal mail-in ballot, if they all went in the post office to make sure they've got the cancellation on it, the lines of the post office would be insane. So I think that the Supreme Court made a decision without even understanding what is actually happening in reality on the ground with the Postal Service. They don't even understand the definition of a postmark in the year 2026.
Right. And I'm not a lawyer either, but I know what's happened. Now, by policy, the states that allow ballots after Election Day are working around the postmark as proof of casting. And in other words, the Supreme Court, I believe, made all those statutes illegal where they use a barcode or they use the signature date on the envelope or they use some other means of determining the cast date being before Election Day rather than the postmark. The Supreme Court really hung their opinion, Barrett's opinion, on the postmark being the evidence that the ballot was cast timely. So I believe all those statutes now are negated by the Supreme Court decision.
Yeah, I think that they are, and I don't think that the Supreme Court. I understand I don't agree with their decision completely, right? So, okay, I don't agree with their decision, but let me take a step back and ignore my personal feelings and whether I wanted it to be done that way or not. I just don't think they understood the decision that they were making. And it seems to me they didn't have the information they needed to have to make the decision. If they're saying the states have the right to make the election law, okay, maybe they'd go back and say, yeah, well, our decision stands. The state just needs to change their laws to work with the Postal Service. But the Supreme Court is also relying on the definition of a postmark, so it should make sure it has a proper definition.
Correct. And I listened to the oral arguments, and it never came up there. The plaintiffs hung their case on historical and other things. They really never discussed this issue with USPS, which I thought was very significant at the time. And then it came up kind of the reverse in the opinion where Barrett and the majority kind of hung their hat on the postmark. So I think it's a real problem, and I hope there is some way to resolve it.
I do too. And if there's not through the court, then we definitely need to work on modifying this at the state level where the laws exist. And whether we like the extended, prolonged voting or not, we need to make sure that they understand that people understand what the reality is inside the Postal Service. So in states like California and Colorado that have universal mail-in balloting, they really need to modify their law to work with the way that the post office is postmarking based on the fact that the fact you first mentioned, which is the regional processing centers.
Yes, that's correct. And those laws should be adjusted if they're going to continue with that. But really, the voter who votes by mail has been given this false impression of security for convenience. They're told it's secure. It's just like going in the precinct, and it's so convenient to vote by mail. And nothing can be further from the truth, as I said earlier, with all the vulnerabilities and the different issues, and relying on the USPS and having a postmark. It's way too complex of a system. And unfortunately, there's many, many vulnerabilities as well. And as Jimmy Carter said in the Carter-Baker report in 2005, when they were examining elections in our country, that voting by mail was the easiest way to commit voter fraud. And that's why most countries have eliminated vote by mail. We're one of the few that still allows it.
Okay, Ned, last question. Well, I've got two questions for you. If you could reform vote by mail starting tomorrow, what is a change that you would make?
Well, I would go back to the old system. In other words, you need an excuse to vote by mail because you can't vote in the precinct on election day. So, illness, travel, business travel, your job, whatever it is, you have to apply for the vote by mail ballot. None of this mailing everybody a ballot who's on the voter rolls. The voter has to apply for a ballot with their excuse. And then a few days of early in person voting where people can show up and actually vote in person, like we do in Virginia, uh, and for just a few days of in person absentee. And then all ballots must be received by election day. 30 states allow ballots to come in after election day. A lot of them are from overseas, our military, and then overseas citizens. But all ballots should be in by election day. And then there's absolutely no question about what could happen to those ballots that show up after election day. And the postmark issue goes away because ballots must be received by election day.
Those are very good reforms. All right. The very last question for you is this. We just celebrated the 250th anniversary of America, and you have been working for many years now to protect our elections. What is it that made you the most proud to be an American, and what did you think is we're celebrating 250?
Well, to me, it's the freedom that we have. And that's what I've heard from so many people around the country. It's just the enormous freedom that we have to be whatever we want, to do whatever we want. It's kind of interesting that on our 250th year, we're being inundated by foreigners for the World Cup. And they're all saying it as well as, wow, it's so different here in America than we thought. And this freedom that you have and the ability to do and go and be what you want. That's really what it's all about for me. And that's what I look forward to for my kids and my grandchildren is that same feeling of the enormous freedom that we have in this country created by God for us to be so fortunate to be living in.
Absolutely. And I'm so thankful that God gave us these rights and that our country that we do everything we can to protect them in this country. Ned, thank you for
Absolutely.
joining me today. For more information to help protect elections when it comes to mail-in ballots, where can people go?
The Election Integrity Network website is where we have all of our materials about our election integrity efforts. And I encourage you to join our weekly meetings that we have. We have several now that analyze election process, which is so critical to get right, as your first guest spoke of as well. The process is what we need to fix, and that will ensure that the country's here for another 250 years.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for joining me today, Ned.
Thank you, Jenny Beth.
All right, we've got one more break. And when we come back, we're going to change the tone completely and talk about putting America back into song.
I'm a fighter. No one can say that I'm a running hider. I was born to be do or dyer. I'll make it righter. Don't throw that towel just yet. Don't cash in that last bet. 'Cause I hit harder when I'm tired. I'm a fighter.
Our country has always been held together by our shared story, and sometimes music tells that story. Jon Kahn wrote the anthem Fighter, which we're just playing. He wrote it about the strength and tenacity of President Trump. And you just saw that as we're coming back from the break. The song went viral during the 2024 presidential campaign. Jon also wrote American Heart, which became known as the Tea Party anthem back in the early part of the Tea Party movement, when he would travel around the country country at events with his good friend Andrew Breitbart and sing the song behind a disguise of a trucker and aviator glasses to protect his identity from his colleagues in Hollywood, because even back then he had to worry about cancellation. He has worked with members of the bands of Creed, the Foo Fighters, and the Wallflowers. Now Jon is living in Nashville, Tennessee. He's the COO and Minister of Culture for Breitbart News, and he just wrapped up a special project for America 250. Jon Kahn, welcome back to the show.
Hi, Jenny Beth. How are you?
I'm great. It's so good for you to be here. Tell us about this amazing new project you've been working on.
So at Breitbart, we wanted to do a lot of special content for the 250. And as you know, from knowing Andrew Breitbart the way I did, culture dictates a lot of politics. His famous quote was, "Culture is upstream from politics." And, you know, music specifically is one of America's greatest exports. And now in the wake of AI and all these things that are sort of homogenizing music, we wanted to reach out to Nashville songwriters and get original songs from them written specifically for this project that nobody's ever heard and they have never played. And, you know, we did 10 different songs and we could have done 50, but we just didn't have time. We did it in conjunction with SiriusXM. So they came down and we recorded it at the SiriusXM studios in Nashville. And then we wrote up each song, and Sirius did a special, and it was a really special project for us.
The songs are amazing. I love the fact that you are doing this and that you're trying to celebrate America 250. And maybe you'll have time throughout this year. Maybe you can still get those other 40 done.
Yeah, absolutely.
Popular culture spends a lot of time just doing everything they can to tear America down. Why did you want to build it up and celebrate it?
Well, I have always found that pretty hypocritical that the people that benefit so handsomely from the First Amendment and artistic expression are the ones bad-mouthing and calling us all fascists and trying to censor people. And yet they are the beneficiaries of our First Amendment, and they're attacking the founders of the Constitution. They're attacking the framers, everything. And it never made sense to me. So, and since I moved to Nashville, which is very, very different than living in Los Angeles, particularly working at Breitbart, being conservative, I have found that there are so many patriots in the arts here. And even in Nashville, people, you know, kind of stay a little bit below the radar until they do that kind of wink, wink conversation where they realize you're on the same side of things. But it's really been heartwarming for me to come here and be embraced as a patriot and embraced for working at Breitbart. And I found a lot of like-minded musician friends.
Well, I'm so glad that you found Nashville so welcoming. Welcome to the South, because it's a wonderful place in this country to live. And I think it's so much better than California. California is so beautiful, and the liberals just ruin the state. It's just awful. Okay. Yeah. But enough about California. That's not what we're here to talk about. You brought together all these artists. How did you select the songwriters to work on the project?
So I just, I've only been here a year, so I know a handful of people, and I reach out to the writers that I've written with specifically since I've been coming here for a few years. And then I ask them if they know anybody who they think might want to participate. So I got to meet a lot of new people and work with a lot of different artists. A lot of these songwriters are artists as well. Some of them are mainly focused on songwriting, but Nashville's kind of like a big pickup basketball game. You know somebody, and then they introduce you to another person, and so on. And honestly, everybody I asked to do this pretty much said yes. And if they couldn't, it was a scheduling issue.
So let's take a look at some of the clips from a few of the artists. Before we do that, what do you want people to hear as they're listening to the clip? And how do the lyrics cut to the heart of patriotism?
Well, I think what was so interesting about this project is that I didn't give any direction other than this was for the 250. And how do you feel about the country at this moment? And every single song was not only different for the most part lyrically, but stylistically, they were very different. But I think the common thread amongst all of these songs is love of country. And whether that be praise of the military, one of the clips I think you're going to show is an amazing singer-songwriter named Lauren Massetti, whose great-grandfather came to Ellis Island, broke the cycle of her Italian family living in a small Italian village for since the 1500s, And he got up and looked around the world and said, I want to be in America and change their family and her life forever. So there was a common thread of how they viewed the country. And there's one clip that we aired yesterday, I think you're gonna talk about as well. That was a complete populist, kind of a middle finger to the elite. And it was about the working man. His mother worked in the post office, totally different style than anything else. And it's just an amazing song. And it's called Us. So hopefully your audience will enjoy some of these clips.
All right, well, let's play the clip.
Okay.
Sounds like America. Oh, sounds like the way it's supposed to be. Sounds like America. Oh, sounds like America. America to me.
They gave them hell, laid down their lives with those 50 stars and 13 stripes, bleeding red, white, and blue, so I could live the way I do. Oh, they fought the fight till the fight was won. They sacrificed, paid the price for me and you. They did what they did, so I didn't have to.
You can't spell USA without us. You can't spell USA without us. Or America without me. And my kind, I guarantee that the land of the free will go bust. 'Cause you can't spell USA without us.
Jon, these songs they make me feel so proud to be American. I love them. And we didn't have the one from the Ellis Island song, but we're going to link to that, and we'll make sure that we share that on social media. The songwriters really have honored the legacy of America and those who've served in our military. What kind of response are you getting, and what are you hearing from people who've heard these songs?
Well, people are loving them. I mean, it's funny. I have not seen clips like that back to back because I've been writing about these one by one, and I'm swollen with pride watching those clips together. And that's only three of the 10. Everybody is super ecstatic about the project. The songwriters that have reached out to me after we wrote up and aired their songs on Breitbart and put them on social media, they're just ecstatic. And I think they were just honored to be a part of it. And it's super humbling to have a platform like Breitbart, now your platform, to showcase these artists who, don't always get a chance to express how they feel about the country.
Jon, not only did you organize songwriters, you also participated in the project. You co-wrote a new song called The United Saints of America with Michael Farron. Let's watch a clip from that one as well.
You can say what you want, you can throw stones, but on your worst day, it's still home sweet home. You can't kill the idea to put its roots deep down in dust and blood. Done a whole lot of bending, but you can't make or break. Hello, high water, that flag's gonna wave. If you wanna know what keeps this crazy thing standing up, it's the United Saints of America.
Jon, that one got the attention of President Trump himself. What inspired you to co-write that song, and what is it like to get the attention of the President of the United States again with your music?
Let's take the last part first. You never get used to that. It's always a surprise, and it's always sort of otherworldly if the president singles you out, hopefully for a good reason, like this was. But when I was putting together this project, everybody was asking me, well, what song are you going to write? And honestly, I hadn't gotten that far in my thinking yet. And then I realized, you know what, I should participate as a writer. And so Michael Farron is a good friend of mine here in Nashville. I've written a lot of songs with him. He is a great patriot, a man of faith, has taught me a lot since I started writing with him. And he was basically my first reach out. And so I told him about the project. He wanted to be a part of it. Comes back to me a week later, says, I got this title rumbling around my head called the United States of America. And I loved it. And so I drove down to where he lives down in Columbia. We sat there, he smoked cigars, and we had a bourbon and sat outside on his patio and started talking about what it meant. And an hour and a half later, we had the song, and we decided to record it.
It's a great song. I love that song. I love all your music. You do such a good job. So where can people go to listen to the whole project, and what is the most important thing you want people to take away from this project?
Well, I think, first of all, you can go to Breitbart.com, and there's a 250 section. And in that section, there's a section called American Soundtrack, where you can read about every one of these artists and watch the videos for each of their performances. And like I said before, this is the first time they've ever performed these songs, which I thought was pretty special to be a part of that too. And it was special for them. And in terms of what people can take away from it, I think, we're so used to, as you mentioned earlier, the elites in popular culture looking down on this country and looking down on people who love it, to see a myriad of talent at different ages, genders, walks of life, writing about how much they love the country, and for people to understand that not every artist is looking down on our way of life.
Yeah, I think that is a really important thing for people to understand. Sometimes it's really easy to get frustrated by the culture, but you're helping remind people that there are artists who really do love America as much as we do. Jon, one other quick question for you, and then I want to say something after that. But here's a question I've been asking all the guests today. We just celebrated America 250. What did it mean to you personally?
It's weird. That's a great question, because I thought about it. I felt, and maybe it's because I was so deeply involved in this project, I think I would have felt this anyway, but I was more patriotic than I think I've ever been in my life. And I consider myself a patriot going in. And I think just this project, and there were other, we had historians write pieces for Breitbart. We had senators send us videos about, what they love about this country. I mean, I was just immersed in all sorts of material that from so many different types of people expressing the same feeling, which is love of country. And, so this year, I don't know, I just felt a tremendous amount of pride. And, I hesitate to say more than I usually do, because I like to think I feel a lot. But this year felt very, very special. And I want to remind people that it's not over. It's still the 250th, and we've got a few months left before it'll be 251. So let's keep that patriotism flowing.
Yes, that is exactly right. We have a few more months left, and we should continue celebrating it throughout the entirety of this year. Jon, Andrea would be proud of you. You're reminding people the importance of America, and you're doing it with culture. And I know Andrew would be so proud of the work that you did on this project, and the entire team at Breitbart News has done to honor his legacy.
That means so much. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining me. And when you release more music, I want to have you back on the show. And hopefully I can go to Nashville sometime and meet up with you, or you can get down here to Atlanta and meet up with Kevin and me.
I would love that. We've been friends a long time, so I appreciate it, Jenny Beth.
It's so good to have you. Thank you, Jon.
Bye-bye.
All right, before we go, remember, these were our two calls to action for today. One is focused on Save America, and the other is on that Office of Management and Budget rule. We need to make sure that we pass the Save America Act. So call the Capitol switchboard at 202-224-3121. And you can go to passthesaveamericaact.com to email if you prefer to do that rather than making a phone call. Remember, we also can urge the president to veto the housing bill until and unless the Save America Act is added to it. He has until tomorrow, July the 10th, to veto it. Go to whitehouse.gov/contact and urge the president to veto the housing bill. The next thing is to add your name supporting the merit and grants rule that the Office of Budget and Management has offered. You can do this by going to TPP, like Tea Party Patriots, .me/OMB comment. TPP.me/OMB comment. This is a task before us, and both asks It only takes you a couple of minutes to do this. Call both of your congressmen, leave a message at whitehouse.gov/contact, and then go to tpp.me/OMB comment. Thank you, the grassroots, for demanding common sense and election integrity. You are able to turn your passion into meaningful action, and that's how we can make a real difference. Now, I want to leave you with some good news, and there's always some to highlight. 1 year ago this week, the Working Families Tax Cut became law. It prevented the biggest tax increase in American history from being enacted, and it locked in President Trump's low tax rates. Every single Democrat in the House and the Senate voted against it, and each of them was willing to allow the largest tax increase in American history to go into effect. I've said for the past year that we need to give this bill time, and in about a year, give it about a year to take effect and time for the economy to react. And I've predicted that we would see positive economic movement as a result. A year later, Walmart is cutting grocery prices. Gas is coming down. Recently, even a Democrat's governor admitted that provisions of the bill were smart policy. So that is really good news. Breitbart News reported about these cuts from Walmart, and they said a 1 pound roll is of 73% lean ground beef has dropped from $6.74 to $5.94. Fresh corn has fallen 25 cents an ear from 68 cents. A 2 1/4 pound bag of cherries has been cut from $11.18 to $5.63. 24 packs of Coke and other sodas have declined by about a third. This is a positive for the economy, and it is positive for America and American families. So if you're seeing positive economic change, don't be quiet about it. Tell your neighbors good policy is not an accident, and no law is ever completely permanent. You voted for lower taxes. You voted for an improving economy in 2024. And now we're beginning to see fruits of that vote. We have to make sure we protect it this year in elections. None of what we cover in this show today is out of your hands. There's always something you can do to help us hold on to this republic. And a big congratulations to President Trump, as Palm Beach International Airport has officially become the President Donald J. Trump International Airport today. Eric Trump made the inaugural landing just after 5 o'clock this morning as Trump Force One landed on the runway synonymous with the name of the most it's synonymous with the president. Passengers can now expect to see not PBI as the airport code, but to see DJT beginning on August 18th. And we look forward to seeing everyone's new bag tags when they visit Mar-a-Lago, which, as many people call it, is the winter White House. All right, do not miss us tomorrow. We have every single Friday for the next 2 months, we are running our Founding Principles series, which is a deeper look at the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence. And we started this on Monday, so if you didn't get to see our first training, make sure you check out Monday's episode, which is on your screen right now, and you can catch it on YouTube, Rumble, or wherever you listen. And then tune in tomorrow and every Friday as we continue this series for the next 2 months. Only American citizens should decide American elections. Go make those phone calls right now. I'm Jenny Beth Martin. This is the Jenny Beth Show. God bless you, and God bless the United States. We'll see you tomorrow. If you enjoyed today's conversation, go ahead and hit like and subscribe. It really helps us reach more people who care about liberty and the Constitution. You can find this and other episodes at jennybethshow.com, as well as Facebook, YouTube, Rumble, Instagram, X, and your favorite podcast platform.
The Jenny Beth Show is hosted by Jenny Beth Martin. The Jenny Beth Show is a production of Tea Party Patriots Action. For more information, visit teapartypatriots.org.